Hello everybody, it's Neil Foley from the Business Growth Club here again. I'm very pleased today to be with Gary Burton of Principles for Performance. Easier to read probably than say. How are you, Gary?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Good afternoon, Neil.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving us your time, Gary. And in essence, what we're going to be doing today is exploring the world of thought, the world of thinking, and the flow of thoughts. And I've met Gary a couple of times now, and he's a really interesting fella with a really interesting story. Because your background, I know you're dealing with things of the mind and psychology and things now, but that isn't your background, is it, Gary?
No, not really. In an indirect way it is, but my background is that I've spent 30 years in direct sales and marketing. Mostly at that time, started off as a salesman, but most of that time spent running sales and marketing businesses basically. So, no it isn't, but indirectly I've always had a fascination with psychology and what makes us tick basically.
Getting into the mind of the salesperson is never easy, is it?
No, sometimes it isn't. But yeah, I've always found that fascinating, first for myself in terms of personal development, and then, as I say, when you're dealing with the sales force and customers and anybody basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what we'll do over the next half an hour is just explore this a bit further. So tell me about the principles behind this, Gary, this new process that you're using to understand the power of thought.
Well, basically what it says is there's a psychological paradigm that have got certain principles behind the human experience, and predominantly the first one is the principle of thought, and that is that we experience life essentially from the inside out, i.e. there's a world out there, work, families, money, relationships, the past, the future, and it looks like all those things come together and give us an experience of life, give us our feelings and emotions basically. But when you step back away and look at it a bit closer, you can see, although there is obviously a world out there of all those things, how we experience them comes from the inside out, i.e. from the principle of thought, from the way we think from moment to moment basically. And that shapes our experience and not the outside world.
So is that why we could both experience the same thing but react in very different ways?
Exactly that, yeah. If you look on a simple basis, if you take anything really, but some simple things, if you take 3, 4, 5 people can go watch a movie, it's the same movie, but we can all have totally different experiences of it. One can think it's absolutely brilliant, another one think it's pants and would never go and see it again and would tell everybody that, and somebody else would take it or leave it basically. So yeah, and the more you look into that, it's a very simple example, but you'll see that's true when you look at just about anything basically.
I suppose it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But you never think of it that way, do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So where does that come from then? Where, is that from childhood, or is it genetic, or?
Basically, it's the very essence of how we experience life. So that's why we call it a principle, because it's always been there and it always will be. Principle in the same way as you can look at gravity as a principle. You might not understand gravity, you might not be able to explain it, but we're all subject to it basically. And you might not even believe in it, but it doesn't mean that you're going to float to the ceiling if you don't.
True.
It's there. And the principle of thought is the same. It's the way that we experience life, and it's there from the moment that we're born. But it's a formless energy that ebbs and flows basically, and it's a case of looking at how that works against how we sometimes think it works that can make a profound difference to you.
So you're able to explain that a bit deeper then, Gary, in terms of understanding how it works, the ebbs and flows. I'd never thought of it as ebbs and flows. I would have thought is thought.
Yeah, well, if you look at how we experience anything, we just use the example of how 3 or 4 or 5 different people can have a different experience of the same thing. But if you take it one step further, and when it really seems to have an impact, certainly was for me, when I saw that from day to day, moment to moment, my experience of the same thing can change. Say, for again, a simple example, which always comes to mind for some reason. My partner, my girlfriend, one day she can say something to me and I laugh, and the next day, 2 or 3 days later, she'll say exactly the same thing, and I cop the hump about it, basically, and we might have a row about it. Another day she might say the same thing. I don't even acknowledge it. It doesn't even register, basically. So that's how thought works. It comes and it goes. But what we tend to do and what we get caught up in sometimes is we sort of see it differently, and we see it as something that's far more solid and real. So we can get caught up in thought, basically, and we can give it meaning and we can take it seriously. And I call that something like thought stacking. Somebody will say something to you, you'll get an image in your mind of it, you'll dwell on it a bit. If they've said that must mean this, so I've got to do that about it, basically. And we build up these whole scenarios.
None of which may be true.
None of which may be true, and any of which can be experienced in infinite different ways when we see it differently.
So is the principle then that this is where conflict comes from?
Yes, that's a very good point. Conflict is just two people seeing things differently with two different sets of thoughts going on, basically.
Yeah.
And it's something that I explain to people when we're working together. Conflict can seem very real sometimes, an argument, a disagreement, conflict, in a work setting, in a relationship. But all it really is two or more sets of people with a lot of thinking going on, none of which can be the same because thought's so infinite. So we're going to live in our own thought-generated reality. But to us it looks real, to somebody else they can't understand it.
So what do you do with this? So now I sort of understand a bit about the principle. So armed with this information, are we able to control our thoughts then?
You can try and control your thoughts,
right,
but there lies a separate issue. There's many other types of interventions and psychological understandings, NLP, CBT, positive psychology. All these things acknowledge that we experience our reality through thought, in my understanding of them anyway, which can be limited. But most of these things then look in the direction of exactly that you then have to in some way control the way you look at things or reframe or change the way you look at things. These principles are far more focused on the nature of thought. Like I said earlier on, look at the natural ebb and flow of it. And if you leave thought to its own devices, it just naturally moves on. Take for instance, if you're feeling typically stressed or angry or frustrated or anxious about something, that can only last as long as you think it. The moment you stop thinking about it, the moment you have another thought, that feeling moves on. So it looks like the feeling is coming from outside, from what somebody said, or from a certain circumstance or an event. But actually, it's just purely down to whatever thoughts popping up in our head in the moment. So what we say with these principles is that you don't need to control it. In fact, that's very difficult because more often than not, that just gives you more thought, basically, and makes you get stuck even more. You just have to understand the nature of it, and it will flow naturally.
So is it understanding the nature of it in the sense of not giving it credence or acknowledging that it's real to me?
That's a good point. It's sort of a bit of both. It's not taking it seriously, but understanding that because thought is so effective, it's so creative. I liken it to it's like the world's best IMAX movie, basically. Thought is the best special effects department in the world. It really makes things real to us, basically. And that's when it involves our senses and it can impact us physiologically, basically. It can seem real, but the more you understand that it is a formless energy and it will come and go, the less impact that it can have on you, especially when you focus on things like stress, anxiety, worry, and frustration.
And is that where you're using this, because I know you use this in a business sense and also within a number of work that you're doing within prisons. Is this how you use it then to help people assess how seriously they should take things or how they should react? Or
Yeah, it's showing them just how we actually work, and how we work far less effectively from a busy mind with a lot of thinking going on, and how we work far more effectively from a calm mind, from a point of clarity. When our personal thinking falls away, that's when naturally inside of us we've got all the resilience, the creativity, the peace of mind that we need, basically. And that's what this points to. That's always within all of us 100% of the time.
so how do we get to that then? What work do you do to help us get to that?
It's there. We just have to recognise it. To use another analogy, my daughter used to. She's older now, but she used to collect the Disney snow globes.
Yeah.
And the analogy that I use: if you pick up a snow globe and you shake it, you won't be able to see what figures are inside it. But the moment you set it down,
Yep.
it goes back to its natural state. The snow falls away and you see what's inside, basically. Well, our minds are exactly like that. They're self-correcting mechanisms, basically, and left to their own devices, we will naturally calm down and find a place of clarity inside of us. So, what it's all about really is getting people to sit back and reflect on that and consider that, basically, because when you do, there's something innate about this that tells you, yeah, this makes sense to me, basically.
And are you then able to trigger that feeling of calmness, that feeling that this is just a thought flow, if you like?
The more you look to understand it, and the more you see it, the more it will naturally occur, basically. That's what I've found in my experience, and in the experience of the people that I work with, whether that be in business or individuals, or indeed within the prison system, which is one of the best testing places, if you like, with it, because this is all about it's not your external circumstances that dictate your experience, and there's not a better place to see evidence of that is when you go into prisons and see the impact that it can make. But that said, if you're human, you can benefit from this, so it can have a huge impact within businesses, for individuals, anywhere, basically.
And for businesses, from a business viewpoint, is it people who are suffering with stress, who are struggling to cope? I mean, what sort of people would really benefit from this more than
Can
most?
be. I've found in my experience it's just about everybody, like myself. I ran very successful businesses. I was MD of several sales businesses, substantial revenues, etc. And I didn't even realise that over a period of time I run with a certain level of stress and anxiety and overwhelm, which I didn't really recognise. It just felt normal to me. And within a business environment, we even sometimes convince ourselves that stress and worry can be a good thing. But again, when you stand back and reflect on that, you see that plainly isn't so. And
No.
we work more effectively and creatively and innovatively from a calm mind, basically. So yeah, it can make a huge difference to people that are feeling extreme levels of stress and anxiety and overwhelm in a workplace or personally. But on the other hand, it can work very effectively for leaders of businesses that are performing very, very well within their businesses. Because when they see where that comes from, where that innovation comes from, where that creativity comes from, and can tap into it even more, it can take their businesses to another level, basically.
So it sounds, because you've used that term creative and innovation, those terms. So is it for creative people more than other people? I know in a sales environment you wouldn't necessarily say you were creative. I wouldn't have thought, but
No, when I use those terms, I mean it. We can. I think again, we can all be creative and innovative in just about any business that we're in. in any career that we're in, and we can certainly be more productive and effective, basically. And that's what this is pointing to. It makes an impact on a practical day-to-day level, ostensibly. I'll give you an example, if I can. I've been working with a marketing business since the start of the year, and I started off working with the leaders of the business, the directors and owners of the business to start off with, and we did a program over about 6 weeks with those guys, and they saw some profound shifts in the way that they was working and within their home lives as well. They was a very successful business anyway. They're putting year on year double-digit growth on their business, but they just wanted to see if they could take that forward, especially from the perspective of increasing the well-being of their team.
Oh, okay.
That was what they wanted to do directly. So I suggested that I go in and work with them first, which we did. We had some profound impact on the 3 directors. One explained, which he doesn't mind me talking about, that he talked about wanting to tame the bear. Right, basically, that he's a very effective leader of a business. His team loves him, but he had a certain way about him where he could, when he got to a certain stress level, that came out of him in not too many productive ways sometimes. And when he saw where that was coming from, that changed for him.
Really?
And over the last 6 months, he's been a lot more relaxed. He's been less stressed. And certainly all the people within his team have seen a massive benefit from that.
And that was all from a 6-week program that you put together for them?
Yeah, that was
amazing return.
That was over 6 weeks, and I've since gone on to work with probably now 90% of the people within the business. But one of the most effective things I wanted to point to, that the environment has changed, and the feel of the place and the motivation within the place has really gone forward, which is a subjective thing, but that's certainly the case. But one of the things they've seen is a very strong forward direction in terms of the volume that they're producing. And one of the things that they've just gone into over the last 2 months, they noticed over the summer, where there was a succession of bank holidays, that they was working more effectively within the 4 days of the week than the 5 days.
Really?
So they made a decision to switch to 4 days.
Really?
Many of their people are paid by performance, and they was actually earning more in 4 days than they were in 5. And because of the revenue coming into the business, the people that were on salaries, they were able to be paid their normal salaries and work 4 days a week, which is a huge evolution in the format of that business.
Yes.
And the way that has impacted the business
that's astonishing.
Has been incredible. And the MD says that although the data pointed towards that fact, if he didn't have that state of mind where he was more open and he had more clarity, he would have never in a million years dreamed of doing something like that.
No, because it's a brave thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
On its own, without the principles behind it.
Absolutely. So
that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I know in our part of the world, in Norfolk, retaining talent is actually really hard. Mm-hmm. And I know there has been a couple of conferences recently where they were talking about that, whereas actually if you've got, say to people, you've got a 4-day week with a decent income and the performance-related income, I can imagine it's a huge advantage, isn't it?
It's a massive advantage.
Yeah.
And a big part of that business is a telemarketing business, and so obviously that gives them a massive advantage over other businesses, basically. So we're really excited to see how that's going to play out over the coming month with the ongoing benefit of me working with the guys on an ongoing basis.
Well, I guess the other advantage once it's spread through all the teams, there's a common language, isn't there? There's a commonality that people can, what somebody else is, how they're reacting, or
absolutely
you can try and sort of empathise more with them. Can't
absolutely, and what you touched on earlier on, there's been a drastic reduction in any form of conflict within the business.
Yes.
The way people are interacting with each other, the way they're getting on, has changed dramatically, because they start to see more and more that exactly where if somebody gets irate or gets frustrated, where that's coming from. That's coming from them and not from anywhere
So it's
else.
less of a personal attack then, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes you look at things far less personally, like you say, and far more universally, as in that's just the way we work.
Yeah.
And that can work on any level, from an individual to a business to any sort of macro level with society in general, basically, which is.
So where does this come from? Is there a founder somewhere, Gary?
These principles were first uncovered by a guy called Sydney Banks back in the 70s.
Oh, so it's been around a while then?
Yeah, it's been around a while. That's a great story in itself. Sid Banks was a Scottish welder that lived in Canada, and he was relatively uneducated. He left school at an early age, didn't complete his education, became a welder, but from his background he'd always had issues with depression and anxiety going back to his childhood, family, stuff like that. And his original insight, his original epiphany, as it were, was when he was having another counselling session, and a psychologist said to him, sort of off the cuff, "You're not anxious, Sid. You just think you are." And,
right.
And he saw that on a very, very deep level, and then from that uncovered these principles, basically. And when he had that epiphany, he actually said to his wife, "I'm going to quit my job, and we're going to go around the world talking about how this works to psychologists, psychiatrists, universities,
etc."
And that's exactly what happened.
Uneducated welder.
An uneducated welder.
Or a bright guy.
He went on to write books.
Really?
If you look him up online, you'll see many videos of him online speaking. And it's branched out from there. And now is used in communities, substance misuse, all different sort of areas, criminal justice system.
How are you using this in the prison service? I know you're doing some work in.
Yeah, we basically go into. There's a couple of prisons that I work with directly, a Category C prison, a Category B prison, over in the Midlands, and literally we go in and talk to prisoners. It's a voluntary course, it's not mandatory as far as they're concerned, like a lot of them are for their sentence plans. They volunteer for it. One particular prison, the lady that I work with, a lady called Jacqueline Hollows, who started a social enterprise called Beyond Recovery, working in prisons and communities a couple of years ago. Amazing lady. We run courses in the prison. As I say, in one particular prison, we've now trained something like 240, 750 guys, and it's making a massive impact in the prison as a whole.
And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Gary. Just the thought popped in. So, are you able to measure the impact in terms of less acts of violence?
Yeah, there's actually some research going on. One of the research papers is just about to be published in a criminal justice journal, basically, and it's proving. We do research with the guys. We do well-being research with them and research into their actual understanding of how life works, basically, and it is showing both quantitatively and qualitatively that there are massive shifts with the guys. Reductions in anxiety, stress, substance misuse, self-harming, and we're because it's now been going a couple of years, we're starting to get the first evidence that that is drastically reducing reoffending as well.
Really?
Which obviously will be amazing. Basically.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. So presumably the Home Office have thrown huge sums of money at this and said, "Go on, Gary."
Not quite,
no.
not at the moment. But
No.
Jacqueline's working very hard with the social enterprise to actually make inroads into that, and it's gradually taking a hold and branching out into
Needs to, doesn't it?
prison. Without a doubt, the prison system is an area that needs massive assistance, basically. And she has actually started to work with some of the staff in the prisons as well.
Right, okay.
Which is really helpful.
Yeah,
because
they suffer a
the
lot with stress.
Yeah, and a lot of officers have seen the dramatic impact that we've had on some of the prisoners that they thought would never change, and have seen that and have started to get them involved themselves, which is brilliant, basically.
Because you even mentioned to me before when we were having coffee, Gary, that a couple of the prisoners are actually now being trained to be practitioners themselves.
Yeah. We had a seminar about 6 weeks ago, put on by 12 of the guys that have been most impacted by this understanding, and we had about 35 visitors come from all walks of life from outside to come and see the seminar that the guys put on, and 2 of the guys from that group actually graduated on that day, have now become fully fledged facilitators, and have now actually started running programs themselves within the prison, which is a brilliant.
Yeah. Because they have presumably the credibility with the fellow inmates.
Yeah, we always connect with the guys when they see where we come from, but these guys can take that to another level, basically.
Yeah, they have.
So they really resonate when they tell their story and where they've come from and what they've seen and the transformations that they've had. It really is impactful.
So really what you need more than anything, and Jacqueline needs it, you need a champion, don't you? You need somebody either in the Home Office or somewhere who says, actually, you know what? Because, I mean, we don't want to get too political, but the prison system doesn't work, does it? From my viewpoint.
No.
You either lock them up forever because they're violent, dangerous people, or actually what you do is screw their lives up and put them inside for short periods of time. No education, no retraining. They've still got a drug problem, an alcohol problem, a gambling addiction. And then kick them out broken into society and wonder why they reoffend. Yeah.
It can certainly seem like that, and in the majority of cases that can be the issue and the challenge that you're facing, basically. And so we need to look at ways to change it, basically. And the very nature of this understanding is that it does change from the inside out. The outside doesn't have to change for them to have a different experience. But the amazing thing is, when they do change from the inside, then their circumstances change anyway, because they become less violent, they become less stressed, they self-harm less, and therefore they are able to progress and then take on things like education.
They're ready then. So presumably this is well known throughout the world. So is this stuff, techniques, etc., practiced in different countries?
Yeah, it's practiced all over the world. It's growing exponentially. It started. It was. If you look online for, you can Google the 3 principles. You can see the varying areas that it's worked. In. It has been strongest in America over the time, but in the last probably 6-7 years it's growing tremendously in the UK. There's an annual conference every year. I think 6 years ago was the first one, starting about 30 people in a room. I've been to the last 2 years, and this year there was 1,000 people.
Wow.
Down at the Allianz Stadium in North London. So, and most of those people are coaches and practitioners.
Right.
So it's growing all the time and going into every walk of life.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
So because people are starting to see the impact it can have, established psychologists and psychiatrists that have run traditional practices for many years have started to use the understanding because they've seen the impact that it can have with it.
And do they use it in conjunction with some of the other techniques? That
Not normally, from what I've seen. Once you see how this understanding works, it goes in a pretty different direction to most traditional interventions and psychological paradigms. And there's all sorts of people that are working with it now, from the therapists to NLP practitioners, as I say, to psychologists, psychiatrists. But when people see how well the understanding works, they normally go full blast with it.
Go for it. Yeah. And am I right in saying, Gary, you run workshops on this? So if people wanted to find out more, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, I run workshops. My website is principlesforperformance.co.uk. And
is that with the 4 being FOUR?
Well, you can actually get it with either one, but it's actually
okay.
number 4.
Number 4, okay.
Yeah. And I'm currently looking to set up some open workshops that you'll see details either on my Facebook page. That's a personal Gary Burton, or my LinkedIn profile, or my website. Very, very shortly, I'm going to be looking to run open workshops in the new year.
Yeah, that sounds good. Come along to some of those. And finally, Gary, something I always ask people in terms of, you're an experienced fella, certainly from a business viewpoint, and I guess in life in general. If you were able to advise your younger self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself if you could get hold of yourself as an 18-year-old or whatever? What would you say?
Well, even before I came across this understanding, through as you get older, you realise maybe to not be so impulsive, and step back a little bit and think and be a little bit more measured in what you do. That certainly would have been good advice to my younger self.
Would it?
And obviously with this understanding and seeing where our experience is coming from moment to moment through our thinking, that has helped tremendously in that impact. Even at my age, I've learned something over the last couple of years.
So you're less impulsive now than you were?
Oh, hugely so.
Are you?
Yeah,
really?
Absolutely.
Oh, we need to talk, Gary. I could do with that. But that's been really great, Gary, and I really appreciate your time and explaining more to us. So you can find details on the website. Do you want to give the website address just one more time, Gary?
Yeah, it's principles number 4 performance.co.uk, and or you'll find me on LinkedIn, Gary Burton, and my personal Facebook profile, any of those places.
Brilliant. Okay, and obviously you can find out more about the Business Growth Club at businessgrowthclub.net, and this podcast will be on iTunes as well as our own Spreaker channel. So until next time, goodbye.